On Xtreme 4x4, Project Ranger Resurrection looks nothing like it did when Ian and Jessi unearthed it from the boneyard. Today, they'll wrap the roll cage and design the suspension. Plus, it doesn't get any more extreme than Sub-Zero ice racing from Colorado.
Welcome to Xtreme 4x4. This week we're jumping back on Ranger Resurrection, the show where we turn that wrecked Ford into something that you like to call a Baja Bandit.
That's right. We're designing this thing to tackle just about anything. Mud, rock, sand. We can even put some spikes in the tires to do some ice racing, which we'll show you in our event later today.
But before we get started today, let's get you up to speed. Remember, this was a standard cab Ranger we stretched to accommodate our air scoop intakes. We designed and built a full roll cage, set our wheelbase, so we could fab up our extended frame rails.
We also assembled part of the new drivetrain, which includes a new Venture Gear 4500 tranny and an MP271 transfer case. Then drop them in after checking the placement of the shifter.
After we fabbed up all the mounts for the suspension seats, we finished it off with some killer window nets.
You're still pumped about those window nets? Well, today we're going to be talking about frame design and finish all the tubing on the truck. We're going to mount the fuel cell, we're going to mount the radiator up in there, we're going to mount our 2 spare tire mounts, and then hopefully we can get her off the jig.
And then once this truck is off the jig, we can go ahead, pull out this plastic engine, slip in the real drivetrain in its place, and then we can install all the fiberglass panels on this truck.
With the solid ladder frame underneath of the Ranger and a full roll cage to protect the driver, we can begin to plan out the rest of the cage by using a scale model.
Now, whenever you're building something from scratch, modeling is a great thing to do. If you have the skills and the know-how, you can use a computer program like SolidWorks or AutoCAD to do 3D modeling for you. But if you don't, a little bit of wood and some hot glue work just as well.
This is a 1/12 scale. It's going to be easy to transfer measurements back and forth from the truck to the model. I ran out of glue. Once Ian measures for the down bars and the inside cross, I can cut the balsa wood pieces to scale. But before I glue these in, watch this frame as I hold the back end down and apply a fixed weight at the front end acting as the torsional load. The frame actually twists. Now there's 2 things that you have to remember when talking about frames: strength and rigidity. You can have a strong frame that's going to last forever, but without rigidity, it's going to flex and it's going to twist, giving the driver unpredictable feedback.
Now, if your frame is strong and rigid, the driver will be able to feel, and more importantly, predict how the truck is going to react every time they drive it.
By experimenting with tube placement on our model, you'll be able to see how rigidity can virtually eliminate twist. This is exactly how we'll finish the Ranger cage.
With the model completed, now we can take all these designs and apply them to the Ranger, and we will know that we made the right decision. The modeling allows us to add strength where it is needed and not just guess where tubes are required.
Is that good?
That looks pretty good right there.
Building like this will allow us to have a strong but light chassis.
With the chassis taking place, we can begin to put in some of the pieces we need to make this monster run, and it's going to start with this radiator. Now, we knew that this was going to be a complicated system, so we called the tech line at AFCO and had them help us design it. And it all starts with this 2-core aluminum racing radiator.
Now this rear-mounted radiator is one of the main reasons as to why we added these extended panels. If you remember, we're going to be adding air scoops to force the air into the radiator and cool it off. So now that we have tubing, we can go ahead and mount it. To this truck is to be run hard and fast and not to have any worries when we're out there. And to begin that process, we want to have multiples of everything, and we're going to begin with the spare tires. We've come up with a design that's going to basically shelf the tires and then we're going to strap it in, because this is a race truck and we need to access the spares as quickly as possible. Plus, having them behind the rear axle is going to give us a huge weight transfer to the rear wheels.
And the multiple items aren't going to stop at just the tires. We got this Summit RCI fuel cell, and we originally planned on running 2 of these large cells in the back of this truck. But when we had this set in here and got a look at it, we noticed that this long run here could use a little extra triangulation. So we're going to run another tube right up in here, and we'll get a smaller reserve cell, and we'll drop it down in the frame rails here for backup. Now the nice thing about these cells is they're a plastic cell encased in a metal body. So all we have to do is mount this metal frame to the truck, and then we're good to go.
There's still going to be another bar that goes across here that's going to help hold on the bed sides when we get to this point. But at least you can start getting an idea of how mean this truck looks with those open country MTs and those American racing rims hanging off the back.
After the break, these buggies would make Mad Max proud. Hardcore ice racing when Xtreme 4x4 returns. The Xtreme 4x4 event of the week is brought to you by Fram, America's #1 oil filter.
You know, there's nothing like sitting down, taking a break on something every shop should have. Leather couch and a plasma screen TV.
And this week we're headed to Colorado, where these guys don't put their rigs in storage for the winter. They slap on some badass tires and hit 18 inches of ice.
Yeah, you gotta check this out.
Winter in the Colorado Rockies means race time for the Our Gang four-wheelers.
This is Xtreme.
Throwing on the studs and spikes, they rip up Georgetown Lake.
Just a thrill.
Living on the edge factor, sliding around there and just having fun.
Some people would consider it pretty crazy. It's a lot of fun though, something to do in the winter.
It's extreme. It's different. Where else can you go and race on a lake with what we do with these kind of tires? It's a rush and it's tight, man. The competition's awesome.
For 2 months, they compete in the Bolt class for a spot in ice racing's premier event, the Cheater Invitational.
This is kind of like, you know, the granddaddy of them all.
They race the top 8 men in points and the top 8 women in points, and they just combine them into one class, 16 people, and they all race for one traveling trophy.
There's no money involved. It's just prestige, just to say that you were the best there was, the best of the best.
It's a real honor to be chosen to race in this event. You got to earn your way in.
It gets more and more competitive every year. It's awesome.
They call them bolts or cheaters, and in the big race, they're running these spike-studded tires.
Some people run anywhere from 80 bolts in their tire to up to 125. Basically no limitations on what you can do. You just can't protrude more than 1.5 inches past the treads.
A lot of people think that you can just go out and buy them at the store. They're all handmade. You have to buy a tire, scuff off some of the tread, drill holes, sharpen the bolts, and put them from the inside out. And then we run a tube and a liner inside them.
A guy wraps up a lot of time into building a set of tires.
I probably have 100 hours in building tires.
It's a lot of time, but necessary to get the grip.
Things happen so quick. Whenever you turn the wheel, it turns with the bolts on, you know. So it's such a fast reaction, but it gets you right there, man. It's an adrenaline rush. So that's why we do it.
The traction there is just unbelievable, and it's just a thrill.
Oh yeah, when we start getting sideways, it feels good right here.
As defending Invitational champ, Mike Palmer knows it takes more than tires to win the big one.
To win a race like that, you've really got to maintain concentration, keep your focus. Once you get out of the groove, you're done.
He's grooving in his custom-built ice buggy.
A first-class ice buggy is probably going to run you about $25,000. It's basically a 1951 Willys frame, Chevy motor. It's 421 cubes. It's a 400 small block with a 3 7/8 stroke crankshaft in it. It's got about 602 horsepower and feels good.
When the rules changed 3 years ago, Mike made the switch from the leaf springs.
The suspension is pretty important out here, like I'm sure it is in any racing. This is a QA1 coilover that I run on it with a hypercoil spring. It's real good. It holds the tires on the ice. If you're not on the ice, you lose time. When the track gets really rough in the bolts, that's when you'll see the advantage. It'll skate through them, and the tires will stay planted to where the leaf spring guys will be bouncing and lifting tires a lot.
In this part of the Rockies, wind can gust past 100 miles an hour, so Mike built a wing.
I feel that anything you can get up there is going to give you a little downforce. Even though we're not hitting real high speeds, the wind has got to pin us down some.
Palmer kept it pinned in the Invitational and dominated the 2 at a time 4-race elimination.
Got pretty choppy towards the end, but this thing, it really glues down good when it gets choppy, and I think that's what gives me a pretty good advantage over a few of the guys. You're kind of restricted when you're running the course, but when you can go out and do what works, it feels good.
Did you know that 2-time champ Mike Palmer isn't just an ice racer?
He's a rock crawler too, right?
Yeah, but I think he pulls the bolts out of his tires for that one.
Speaking of bolts, make sure you check back with us after the break because we're going to be bolting in our kick-ass drivetrain back into the Ranger.
For more information on anything you've seen today, check us out online, Xtreme4x4TV.com.
Tape is rolling and action.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Xtreme. Now that we got the Ranger off the jig and on the hoist, we can begin to assemble and install our drivetrain. It all begins with this 347 stroked Ford small block that was built by the boys over at the Horsepower Shop.
And we're going to link that small block to a new Venture Gear 4500 transmission using a center force flywheel and dual friction clutch assembly inside a Lakewood scatter shield. Then we're going to split that power using a new process 271 transfer case. We're banking on this being an indestructible combination.
And with the motor mounts and the trans cross member made, we can marry this whole thing to our chassis. One down. Set, go.
With a drivetrain in place, we can start to think about things like ride height. But before we do that, we need to slip on some body panels.
We chose Perry's Fab and Fiber because they have some of the best looking 6-inch bedside flares we could find for the rear. Now for the front end, we chose their conversion kit that'll fit on our older body style, but make the front end have the newer 98 and up headlight and grille assemblies. Plus, not to mention, they have the monstrous 6-inch flare up front. Now these panels would normally just bolt right on, but in our case, we're gonna have to make some custom mounts. The first step is to temporarily mock these into position so we can set the ride height. This is where it all starts coming together, people.
You can really get an idea of the aggressive stance of that truck with those 6-inch flared fenders.
But it's not about how it looks, it's about how it works.
And we want this truck to have a lot of wheel travel with a somewhat low center of gravity.
And by using the hoist, we can lift it up and down to be able to determine the balance between the two. Keep going, keep going. Whoa.
There?
Yeah, maybe a little bit higher.
There?
We'll try that for now. With the tires in their positions, it's time to get down to business and order in some axles. Dynatrack has sent us a list of required measurements needed for the axles that will end up under this truck. And the first measurement is the position of the transfer case in between the two frame rails. Distance between the frame rails is 29 inches and the center of the output shaft is 14.5. The next measurement is the location of the front transfer case output and whether it is offset to the driver or passenger side, followed by measuring wheel mounting surface to wheel mounting surface. The distance from the ground to the center of the wheel hub, the distance from the transfer case output shaft to the rear of the axle center line, and lastly, measure the distance the transfer case output is from the ground.
Now keep in mind, if you're replacing an existing axle, you're also going to have to measure for all your suspension attachment points. But since we're building a custom suspension for this truck, we're going to order ours with bare tubes.
And after the break, we're going to show you the whole entire suspension design process. The whole entirety of it?
The whole entirety. That's a lot.
For more information on anything you've seen today, check us out online, Xtreme4x4TV.com.
Welcome back to Xtreme 4x4. With the Ranger taking shape, we can sit down and have a good discussion about suspension design.
When it comes to custom design suspensions, it's going to take a lot of research and a lot of designing. And the easiest way for us to show you is by using this model. We've added all the extra pieces so it matches exactly what we have on the hoist behind us, minus the body panels, of course.
And by using this model, we can show you all the decisions that we had to go through before we could pick the suspension that's right for us.
And the first one would be a basic leaf spring suspension. It's going to locate your axle latitudinally and longitudinally, but it's not going to give you a lot of flex.
So that's going to lead you to a link type suspension. And the easiest one is a parallel 4-link. That will locate the axle on the back of the truck, but it can twist from side to side unless you add a panhard bar to locate that axle, but that can limit wheel travel.
Now, if you triangulate your upper 2 links, it's going to still locate your axle and it's going to eliminate your panhard bar. The only downfall is your shocks have to be mounted on top of the axle, which is going to limit your wheel travel to the length of the shock.
But if you take that same suspension and move that coilover shock up the lower link, you will add wheel travel to the rear suspension. But that lower link is not designed to handle that kind of load. So we're going to build
one of these.
2 radius arms for the lower links. These will be made at a 1/2-inch wall drawn over mandrel tubing, 1.5 inch diameter. We'll gusset it for strength, but most importantly, we'll make a lower coilover mount halfway down the bar, and that will give us a lot of wheel travel.
I'm going to have to build a jig that's going to be able to make these exactly the same on both sides.
We will mount the rear of the radius arm equal distance from the axle center line, so in essence the link will be coming from the center of the tube. This will intersect the frame 54 inches ahead of that axle, and we'll try to keep this lower radius arm at approximately 10 degrees. We will use 25% of the tire size to determine the vertical separation of the upper and lower link mounts at the axle. It's a good idea to build your upper links close to 70% of your lower link length. And with our lower links being 54 inches, our uppers will be 37. The upper links will be triangulated from the center of the axle to the frame. A good angle to try to shoot for is 40 degrees. Less than this will lessen the upper link's ability to locate the rear axle. Multiple mounting points for the upper links at the frame will allow us to fine-tune this suspension.
To make those adjustable points easier for those upper links, we're going to be using these trick little pieces that we got from A&A Manufacturing. The arms are going to be made from this 1/2-inch wall DOM tubing that we got from Industrial Tube and Steel. One end will be tapped with a right-hand thread and the other will be tapped with a left-hand thread. So as soon as we slap in these super tough QA1 rod ends, we'll be able to adjust those links by spinning it one way, you'll move the axle back, and the other way, you'll move the axle forward.
Now we're almost out of time, but we couldn't let you go without slipping this grill into place just to get another idea how awesome this truck looks. Plus, we're gonna have to cut some tubes out of that engine bay now that the motor's in there to line everything back up.
Well, next time when we do this Ranger, we'll have the 4-corner weight and shock selection, axle installation, wiring, plumbing. Woo! Closer to getting her done. Getting her done. Did I say get her done? I said get her done.